Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is carrier sales teams are being run the wrong way with my friend Brent Evans. How's it going, Brent?
Hey, Joe. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you. So, Brent, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Yeah, so my name is Brent Evans. I'm the co-founder of NextBoard Logistics. We are a carrier sales CRM that helps brokers get the most out of their networks by optimizing their relationships with their carriers.
Very nice. So it's NextBoard.
NextBoard, yep.
And so what are you doing for your customer? What problem do you solve for your customers, and who are your customers?
Our customers, let's start there, are going to be brokers in the freight space. I listened to your podcast with Kevin Hill, and that was an interesting way.
Great.
To break down the demographic of brokers that are out there, right? So we do anything from small cap all the way up to enterprise. I would say our sweet spot really starts at the mid cap brokerage. And really what we look for are brokerages that have carrier sales teams with a carrier sales organization within it, right? Where they have some operational functionality that they're focusing on covering freight specifically. They have a team that does that. And the problem that we're solving there, right, as we'll get into, we feel at NextBoard that brokerages and carrier sales teams are really being run the wrong way. They're not being run to focus on relationships with their carriers, but rather very tactically, very cover the damn load mentality style. And so NextBoard is helping them revert back to the old ways of building relationships with carriers and covering freight as efficiently as possible with them.
Yep. By the way, I'm just looking back. I'm looking through my notes. I interviewed Kevin Hill from Brush Pass Research. You referenced him, and he talks about brokerages, being the smallest are the lifestyle. They're under 1 million in sales. Then there's the micro cap, 1 million to 10 million. Growth, 10 to 50 million. Then mid cap, 50 to 100 million, and then the largest are 100 million or more. And I think he might also have enterprise in there. But anyway, getting back to it, you work with companies that typically are about starting at what sales?
50 million and above is really our sweet spot for sure.
Good. So the problem is in a lot of brokerages, we have automated a lot of stuff, and we're happy to have that automation. But sometimes it means we lose those carrier relationships. And I think also this I think is just such an ongoing problem with the space that is, we know we do better when we work with the same carriers who we trust and like and do a good job for us. We do better when we work with them more, and we want to do more loads with them, but somehow it doesn't happen.
We do better. We reduce our risk. Right. We better serve customers, the shippers, when we work with the guys that we know. But we've kind of gone to this seemingly path of least resistance. Right. And that's just kind of a post and pray mentality, going out to the load boards and finding whatever transactional carrier we can to run that specific load.
Yeah. And I when I was still at a 3PL, I remember we would have a carrier visit us and say, "Hey, what do we need to do?" And we're doing a lot of less than truckload there, but we still did some truckload. And I remember carriers would come visit us, and they would give us the pitch, and we go to lunch, and then we say, "We're going to do more business with you guys." And we talked to the team, and the team would all be on board. And then, like almost like clockwork, 2-3 weeks later, you get a call from that carrier sales guy, and he says, "Hey, I thought you guys were going to use us more." And then I'd go out and I'd say, "Are we not using these guys more?" Well, whatever the reason, I don't know what that reason is. It's not easy.
That's right. And now, I mean, we've seen that, and it gets even harder as brokerages start to scale in size, right? Because there's one rep that might have that relationship, but how do they centralize that data for the rest of their team to be able to leverage that carrier as more freight comes in on the board, right?
You're right about also the relationship might belong to one guy. And I might say, I love working with Brent. We're chums. We talk about football every fall and fishing every summer, whatever it is. And then he leaves and I don't have that relationship anymore. And there's some people who are very good and very competent they might be a little introverted. They don't necessarily build the same fast relationships. And that's a problem. And so, we all know as salespeople that I gotta know 3 or 4 people there because somebody's going to get transferred or quit.
That's right. That's right. I mean, we talk about tribal knowledge all the time and how much it is leaned on in brokerage and carrier sales floors today. You just have that guy. Typically, he's been slinging freight for 30 years, right? And he refuses to use any technology, and he's got all this information that's up here, right, up in his head. And then he retires or he goes to another brokerage, and he takes all of that really useful carrier knowledge along with him. And that's a real problem. That's a real challenge for brokerages.
Yeah. And we also know that the automation that we're using is here to stay and great. We want to continue to use that. But it somehow sometimes gets us disconnected from our customers. And I think people on my podcast will say, this will free you up to build relationships with your customers, free you up to be more of a consultant to your customers. And I don't know if that's not happening. I'm not there day to day. It's probably happens sometimes, but we think I'm freed up from this task of having to enter data or be a clerk. And now I can make more phone calls to my friends like Brent and build those relationships. It doesn't necessarily happen. And also, I can't call Brent and say, Brent, you guys are great carrier. I want to work more with you. And you go, Joe, we don't do your lanes. Oh, well, let's build a relationship. You're like, no, we don't move lanes that you need moved.
This is exactly it, though, right? Like, this is the problem. And one, brokerages don't know which carriers they should lean into to build relationships, right? Not every carrier that you run with should be a relationship carrier. Sometimes, it is a one and done sort of situation. But having a way of actually understanding which ones are the right ones to build those relationships with and having the means to do that is what NextBoard helps brokerages do.
Nice. So, Brent, tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you started NextBoard. And also tell us how you know Shane Gillis.
That's easy because it's the first part of the story. So I grew up in a small town called Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. That's right outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Shane Gillis is also from there. And our moms are actually good friends. So I've met Shane once or twice in my life. That's maybe my closest claim to fame that I have. I have not spoken to him in a very long time, certainly not since he's really blown up recently. So
come on, man. You should call him.
Next time I'm home, I'll see what's going on. So yeah, I grew up there. I ended up finding my way down. I have some family in Florida as well. So I actually ended up going to the University of Florida for school. I got to give a shout out to my men's basketball team for just winning the national championship.
Yes, that was awesome. We talked about it the other day, and I know you got to savor it because it just doesn't happen enough times.
We don't know. We were very spoiled in the late 2000s, right? We thought we were going to win title after title. It's been a long time since we brought home one of the big ones. So I think I've mentioned this on every call I've been on since the men's championship game. So I guess I can probably stop now. I think we're far enough out there. So I went to the University of Florida. And from there, I actually got my MBA at Georgia Tech. I moved here to Atlanta and I got my MBA at Georgia
great
Tech.
School.
It's a great school.
How's Florida?
What you can say is I really don't like the Florida State Seminoles, and I come from a family of them. So that's a thing. But no, I got my MBA at Georgia Tech, which was a great experience as well. And from there, I found myself working for Delta Airlines, actually. So I didn't go straight into logistics. I worked on Delta.com and the Fly Delta app and that experience, which was a very great way for me to start out a career in technology. I got to see kind of what best in class looks like. An app,
for sure.
An app that
they're the best airline.
They are the best airline. I have absolutely nothing bad to say about Delta. They treat their employees really well. It was a great experience for me. Unfortunately, a little thing called COVID happened. I'm not sure if you've heard of that or not. And I was fortunate enough. I chose to leave Delta. I wasn't told to leave Delta. And I moved on. But yeah, it was a really great experience. The years that I was there. A little bit after that, I found my way into a startup. The startup was actually focusing on building a marketplace for industrial materials, and they had a freight brokerage built within it. And I found myself there, and I was tasked with running the tech stack for that brokerage. And that's really how I got my feet wet into logistics and the space. And I can't tell you how informative and how much I learned just by sitting on the floor with the guys, watching them sling freight, back and forth, and seeing the chaos and also the kind of beauty of watching a sales floor just kind of work together. They had a team of 15, 20 guys that were just on the phones all day long, kind of working the freight and watching that brokerage grow. So that's really how I got into the logistics space and how I got into NextBoard too.
So you have a partner, right?
I do. Yes, he and I actually met at that startup. We ran the technology team together. He was more on the development side, and I was on the product side.
So did you see a problem there that you thought, oh, that we can address that problem better than what's being addressed right now in the market?
Yeah, the biggest thing, right, was this company was uniquely placed to invest large amounts of resources into its technology, right? Its technology stack. So custom development. What my partner and I realized is that most brokerages are not in a position to do that. That's starting to change. Brokerages are starting to realize the value in building out their own technology. But largely, we found ourselves building things in house that we were saying, why wouldn't we go, outside to
Right.
go get, right? And that just kind of sounded like a real opportunity for us to start to explore. So, especially as we got into the carrier sales space, we started to see some real opportunity there. And that's when we started to have conversations externally to say, what are people looking for specifically in the carrier sales space? We understand that space pretty well based on our history at the brokerage. What can we start to provide people that people are looking for that can really generate some value for those carrier sales teams? And what we landed on is this carrier relationship problem that everybody wants to build relationships with their carriers, but they struggle to do it. And the fact that there's really no CRM for carrier sales. Unlike every other sales function in every other industry where there is absolutely a CRM for them.
Yep. Brent, before we hit the record button, we were talking about this, is a lot of times you'll talk to brokers and I think this is more 5 years ago than today, but they would love to say, we have a network of over 50,000 carriers that we work with. And you said that's an impressive thing to tell shippers. But if you're one of those 50,000 carriers in that network, you're like, oh yeah, I am in their system and I get their emails, but we never move freight for them, or we did once a long time ago, or something like that. And so there's no ill intent here. When they reached out to you, maybe you had a load and you said, hey, who knows, we might work with this brokerage on a regular basis. But what we would all rather have, what I think the best brokers say, I want to find a core of, I'm going to make the numbers up here, 300 or 400 or 500 or 80 carriers that we work with on a regular basis, and we give them a ton of business and we built relationships with them. That's what everybody wants to do. And I think carriers want that. The phone calls I get from carriers are often, I just want good shipper freight, meaning I don't want to work with a broker. And what I always say is they have a sales team, they have a website, they're on LinkedIn, they are actively pursuing loads while you've invested in trucks and drivers. And I appreciate the difference, but it's not so much the problem that you don't have. It's not the brokers are bad. You're just not working with the right broker for you.
That's true.
Got to find your people.
Yeah, you absolutely do. Right. And going back to the network size, right? The follow-up question there should always be, well, how many of those carriers are one and done, right? You ran one load with them and never heard from them again, right?
What I sometimes have asked is, oh, you have 25,000 carriers in your network. How many checks did you write last month?
There you go. Same question to ask differently, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's really about carrier utilization and reuse and building those relationships. And you mentioned a really interesting point as well, which is we always talk about carrier utilization. That's a big thing that we focus on at NextBoard, and it's definitely worth discussing. The same is true about the opposite, though, right? Broker or shipper utilization on the carrier side, right? There's just advantages for carriers to be working with the same brokers day in and day out. Like they build operational rhythm together. They understand how they like to communicate what's required of them for every load. Even things like payments, having factoring set up accordingly. Like if they're going out to a different brokerage to cover to run every load that they have, it's going to be more work for them. It's going to be more difficult. And so it really goes both ways, right? It's not just brokers want to utilize carriers the same, consistently. It goes the other way too.
Yep. Brent, you guys use what you call you talk about lagging indicators and leading indicators. Please talk about what those lagging indicators are and why we should not be using those and why we should be getting to leading indicators.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things to bring up when speaking with a brokerage. We ask what are the carrier sales reps being measured on? Like, how are they being incentivized? Usually there's a comp plan tied to this kind of thing, right? And we always hear, loads covered and gross profit. It is the name of the game, right? To actually do those two things. And so those are important. I'm certainly not saying that people shouldn't be focusing on that. Occasionally we'll get, we also tie in utilization. So carrier utilization as an aspect of what they're being measured on. The problem with all three of those things is that they're what we're called lagging indicators, meaning the period of time has to end before you can actually understand what those things are, right? So how many loads did they cover, last month? You can't tell anyone what you're going to cover this month. You can do projections and whatnot, but it's all after the fact, right? And so we like to start to understand, what are you measuring that's leading that can help indicate how effective a carrier sales rep is going to be, right? And usually I just get a lot of blank stares, like, I don't know how we would go about doing that. Occasionally we'll get, we measure phone calls as a form of productivity, right? That's like their input into the outputs. I also love when they bring this up too, because what is the quality of a phone call? We don't know, right? Like we have no idea. They could have just been really tactile and asked one carrier, hey, can you take this load? No, hang up the phone, right? Carrier sales reps, like, they should, definitely be trained better than that. It should not be just, can you take this and run? And so the number of phone calls isn't great. Even the duration of phone calls, I always joke and say they could be calling their girlfriend and just like chit-chatting it up, right?
Right.
So while in theory, the phone calls sound like a good productivity metric, it's really not ideal it's really not what these teams should be measured on, to understand what they're actually doing. What we help folks do is start to look at meaningful inputs. So when they're on the phone with carriers, right, we talk about dispositions. How many loads did they bring up and say, can you take this? Can you take this? And get outcomes on them, right? That's step one, right? How many loads are you offering to carriers on the front end? We talk about active trucks, right? We always say when a rep is on the phone with a carrier, and you should always bring up a load, right? First and foremost, can you take this, whatever? The next thing should always be, where do you have free trucks? Are you logging that somewhere in a meaningful place, right? It may get them a load right then and there. That'd be great. Or it might set them up to get freight in the future. And then a third thing, which shouldn't be on every phone call, right? But you should understand their preferred lanes, right? You should know where they like to run. And that should be recorded. So that way, when a load does come up that matches those preferences, you're reaching out to that carrier and you're calling them. These are all things you can look at on the front end to understand what people are doing to set their network up for success, to get more freight, the right opportunities in front of them in the future. And so that's what we talk about when we talk about lagging indicators and leading indicators. A lot of carrier sales teams are not looking on that leading end at all. They're just focused on the lagging.
Yeah. Well, I think the nature of all work is to be responsive and reactive as opposed to proactive. And everybody's trying to get more of those proactive hours in. Those are proactive hours right there.
For sure. And it's funny, like, in a way, I think sometimes carrier sales needs to catch up to other sales organizations, right, that are, in Salesforce, and they're measuring things like, how many outreaches have you done? How many meaningful connects have you had? They're kind of taking that funnel into account on the front end. And it's the same thing. It's a similar concept in carrier sales, right, in terms of getting those reps in, seeing what they're doing on the front end to set themselves up for success then.
Yep. So a lot of companies are still using load boards, and some very successfully, but not everybody. So please use the term post and pray. You're not the only one, but I used that term when we were talking the other day and earlier today. So talk about the post and pray strategy.
Yeah, I always like, we have a slide, right? And it says post or pray, or post and pray, or post and pray. Pray being spelled differently in both those. You can imagine P-R-A or P-R-A-Y or P-R-E-Y, depending upon the circumstances, right? So I want to get out there first and foremost. I am by no means advocating the complete removal of load boards from the process of carrier sales. Load boards serve a very meaningful purpose in finding the right trucks to move your freight sometimes. What I'm talking about specifically here is the reduction in dependency on those load boards. Here's the deal with load boards, right? you put your brokerage up to a lot more risk when you start going out to those load boards, and posting and praying becomes the primary means of covering freight within your organization. What do I mean by that? If you're going out to the load boards, you are very likely not going to be working with a carrier that you have a relationship with or you've ever worked with in the past. That removes any semblance of accountability that carrier is going to have for you. So you're putting yourself at operational risk for this. What do I mean by that? If they don't have any reason to deliver on time for you because it's a one and done load, they might deliver late. They might not show up at all to the pickup, right? They might have another load 30 minutes before pickup that they're offered and they make $50 more on, right? So you're setting yourself up for fall offs. You're setting yourself up for, performance not being great for those types of carriers. Additionally, if you're going to the boards and you're pulling in a new carrier, there's that operational friction that happens as well. This is kind of the unseen tax, right? Posting and pray feels like it's the path of least resistance because it's just click a button, send it out to the boards, and wait for the calls to come in. But really then what you have to do when a carrier actually calls in and says they want to take it, you got to onboard them, you got to vet them, you got to set them up for factoring, you got to do all this stuff for carriers that you don't have to do that for if they're already in your network today, right? So there's that tax, that operational tax that has to happen when you bring in a new carrier. And then the third bit, which is, we see this in the headlines all the time. Joe, I'm sure you talk about it on the show all the time, which is, fraud and cargo theft. I love to say today, we have more visibility into fraud and we have great tools to help prevent it. Highway is a partner of ours and we love them. We think that's a great product. Yet we're still seeing freight fraud, cargo theft on the rise. Like that's a general trend that we're seeing all the time. So brokerages need to ask themselves, how are they insulating themselves as well as possible? Tools like Highway, RMIS, Carrier 411, they're all great starting.
Carrier, sure. Yep.
They're all great tools to help do that. But there can be more, right? So if you're leveraging your network, going to the network first model, as opposed to just going to the boards and finding whoever to take that freight, you're setting yourself up for less fraud, less risk of fraud, I should say. And so that's why the post and pray model is it's a dicey one, right?
Yeah. And I think, the fraud thing is so big. And I say it all the time on my podcast. You're not getting defrauded by somebody you've been working with for 5 years. If you're talking to them on the phone all the time, you're not getting defrauded by them. And by the way, I think sometimes shippers and brokers might get burned because we're so interested in something a little cheaper because it's not an easy business, especially now. And so you go, God, if I just get that extra, I found somebody who's $80 cheaper, boom. And the fact that they don't have a website and they don't want to talk on the phone, they can only text. I know that's a little bit of a red flag, but $80 cheaper.
We said this too earlier, right? Everybody wants the cheapest rate until the load doesn't show up on time. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, let's maybe we are willing to pay a premium to make sure performance is there, to make sure our customers are happy and everyone can get more work in the future, right?
Yes. And, when you have trust, there's a speed to trust. And, there's an account familiarity that you get. There's just a shorthand that you start developing because you say, I work with Brent every day. I know he's not answering his phone right now. He didn't answer his text, but I know what he wants. I know exactly what he wants because we've done this every week for the last few years. And I know his buddy over there. Maybe I'll call his buddy. There's a million little things that happen, and it's trust equals speed.
We call that operational rhythm, right? And it takes some reps to get to that place where you understand how both parties operate, right? When they need to do check calls, right? Like when they need to check in, when they don't need to check in, how they like to communicate. I mean, some carriers, we've talked about this, some are phone guys, like through and through, and they're like, do not try and email me anything. Others, especially larger ones with dispatch and all that, they're like send over stuff in emails. Like that's how they prefer to communicate. That operational rhythm takes time to develop. And you're not going to ever get that with a carrier that you're going to work with one time and move on from.
Well, and I'm a big believer also in that account familiarity. It's hard to say sometimes. But you pick up, saying you're the carrier, you pick up and you say, I'm driving and I know I got to drop this off by 4:00 on Wednesday because Tom at the dock likes to go golfing on Wednesday, so I got to get there by 4:00, or I'm not gonna. And maybe going to the right door, knowing the right turn to take. I know we are all using routing software, but sometimes there's just little things that you get to know because you've been doing it for a while. It's the shorthand, it's the account familiarity that makes things easier. I'll throw one other thing out there. When I was at a little 3PL, we did mostly less than truckload. And for our customers that we worked with on a regular basis, if something went wrong and it was our fault, let's just say something was at a terminal that wasn't being delivered that day, we would expedite it on our dime every time. Like they say, "Hey Joe, I needed that. It didn't get here today." Boom, we expedited it. A lot of times we'd find out before they found out, and we'd expedite it. They never even know. You don't do that on a transactional thing. You say, "Oh, I screwed that load up for Brent.
Sorry,
I'm never
right?
I'm never going to talk to him again because the chance of me getting business there pretty minute at this point. I wanted to deliver because I wanted to do the right thing, but I'm not losing sleep over that. That's not a relationship anyway.
And that's that accountability, right? Like that's what we mentioned earlier. And the concept of having more skin in the game than that one load changes the nature, the dynamic of the relationship, right? And knowing I'm going to take care of you because you're going to take care of me. And that's why, again, putting that network first, helping folks grow their network and understand how they can get the most out of it is where we see, a lot of potential for NextBoard.
So let's just say somebody's listening in the podcast and they say, "Oh, I need NextBoards." Brent, tell me more. What does NextBoard do for brokers?
Yeah. So NextBoard really does 4 key functions for brokers, right? First, we have these kind of robust carrier profiles, and that allows brokers to have really deep understanding of what carriers want and need. This goes beyond what you'd find in like a TMS. So you can add in preferences here. You can add in active trucks. You can add in quotes on various loads or bids that they have. All this sort of information that helps set that carrier up for success in the future. On top of that, then NextBoard has digital freight matching. We realized we didn't invent digital freight matching. Like this has been around for some time now, but leveraging this type of data, in addition to other capacity data that we have access to, things like lane history, for instance, we pool all of this together to determine the best carriers for every single load that they have, right? So right off the bat, in real time, you see a load come on the board and we can tell you, these are your guys. And this is why, right? Oh, this guy has a preference here. This guy has an active truck right here. This guy, all that kind of stuff, right? So we have that. Then we have the offer management side of the house. So, and this is interesting because you mentioned some routing technology in the past. We've met with surprisingly large brokerages that are still, calling over every single load. Whereas at this point, we at least have the option, right, to send digital offers out to carriers. And what that does is just saves reps a lot of time, right?
And what do you call it?
Digital offers.
Okay. And what does that look like?
Yeah. So this is basically, I've got this load here, right? And I, as a rep, can make an offer out to a carrier to say, "Hey, would you be interested in taking this freight for this amount of money, right? This at this rate." And if the carrier then has the means to accept, and that triggers a whole coverage flow back all the way to the TMS, right? This carrier is going to take it at this rate, yada, yada, yada. And then rate con can actually be sent out directly to that carrier. Now, as I mentioned earlier, some carriers are like, "You got to call me on the phone. We got to have a conversation." And that's totally fine. This isn't necessarily for everyone, but if you cover 20% of your freight via digital methods, that's 20% less phone calls you got to have and walk them through, "Hey, here's the requirements of the load. This is, the warehouse you're going to have to pick it up at," like all this kind of stuff. All of that's just sent over to them, via digital means, and they can handle that on their own. So we have this offer management style system that allows reps to collect bids on loads, allows them to send out offers directly to carriers. And then we add in a layer of automation. Like you mentioned automation previously. Just because we're focusing on building out relationships doesn't mean we're anti-automation, right? We still want to build the capacity to streamline flows for our reps, especially when it's super repetitive and we know, they don't have to have that strategic thought process in there. So a good example of this would be like routing guides. If, for instance, you have dedicated freight, or if you just have a big project that runs the same lane constantly and you've built up your knowledge of who runs those lanes really well, as soon as that load hits the board and NextBoard, boom, it's out. We're sending out offers on a regular basis for them, right? So it just streamlines that operation. So it's not everything is so manual in that process. And that's that automation style, automation flow that we offer on NextBoard.
So when companies have come to you and they say, "Hey, we're interested," what's kind of the last straw? Why are they reaching out to you at that point? Because you probably reached out to them 10 times by that point. Why are they finally saying, "Damn, I got to call Brent back"?
To be honest, I think it's because they realize their carrier sales floors are a total wild, wild west. They have so many burning fires that they've got to put out. They've got too many hot loads, not enough pre-booked freight. And they come to us and they say, man, we need to put some order to this chaos. Like, we need to have some structure here. A lot of carrier sales floors have this cover the damn freight mentality, which is very, very, very wild west. Just do what you got to do to get it done. And it's like, there's a better way to go about doing this, right? There's a more standard approach that you can take, a more methodical way that you can actually work through freight, minimize the number of hot loads you have or same day pickups, whatever, same day freight, and really put in the structures in place for your team to actually run more smoothly, right? Without all that chaos.
Yeah. And I think, if I can get to that place where I say, I know my top 80 carriers, well, those are the guys I want to build the relationships with. Those are the ones I, might say, hey, you guys aren't too far from us. Why don't we meet? Let's meet at Manifest. Let's meet at the Broker Carrier Summit. Let's meet at TIA, wherever, and that starts to become, if you have that short list of the people you want to work with, we do have time that we freed up with this automation. And I think it's important that we do actually use some of that time and be very intentional about building relationships and understanding more. Hey, now that we're giving you loads on a regular basis and you're doing a good job for us, what can we do better to help you be successful? We have a few things we'd like you to do for us if it's possible.
Yeah. It really opens up the opportunities, and we've seen just carrier utilization kind of skyrocket once folks get on our platform and really start to leverage this, because that's what, our freight matching incentivizes reuse, right? We focus on getting the carriers that you have more opportunities, right? More opportunities for freight. And so we see the opportunity to build those relationships then, because we're getting those carriers back in the flow of things.
So that utilization, do companies measure that?
Some do. Some say they do. And others do not, right? So I always ask, like to say, are you guys keeping track of this? And sometimes I get a yes, and my follow-up then is, okay, what is it looking like? And I get a slew of different answers that sometimes make sense and sometimes don't make any sense. And it's like, relationship and utilization is something that everyone says that they do. But then I ask what their operation looks like to incentivize driving reuse. And that's where we start to see some cracks and everything, right?
So how do you measure utilization? Is it what's the number? What's the measure?
Yeah, our core way that we do it is loads per carrier within a given time frame. So if you say the last 30 days, how many carriers have you used? How many loads have you had? And then what's the average loads per carrier that you get there? You can look at it at a variety of increments. We do 30, 90, sometimes like in the last week. The other thing that we look at there too, because you can have a wide variety of distribution, you could have, if your loads per carrier is 3, right? You could have every single carrier that you're in with got 3 loads, or you can have one carrier that got 100 loads and then a whole bunch that only had one load in there, right? So because of that variance in distribution, we also look at single use carriers. So kind of one and dones within a specific time period. So how many times did you run with one guy? And then also, how many did you add into the network? How many are actually new into your network? So those are all ways that we can measure kind of your ability to leverage your market to its fullest, your network rather, to its fullest extent.
Am I right to say that when I get a measure like that, the loads per carrier, that's not the end, that's the beginning of the conversation?
Absolutely. You can't really have that conversation until you get that utilization up to a certain degree, right? Now, on the front end, you can establish, hey, we'd like to run with you more. Usually that's off the back of like, you've helped us out and with one particular project or one particular load, and you were great, you were exceptional, right? So we want to kind of expand that book of business. So that's where it really starts. But then once you get that utilization up, Now it's like, okay, how can we like the way you operate? We can rely on you to deliver on time without any claims. So how do we expand that? How do we keep going with that? And that's where that conversation does continue to say, where else do you like to run? Where do you have more trucks? And then it's leveraging that capacity data to make sure they get the right opportunities in front of them in the future.
Brent, I think about this every once in a while. I'll talk to a carrier on my podcast, and more than one has said, we grow with our customers. So they say, hey, you've been really doing a great job on Chicago to Detroit. Would you consider doing some loads for us from Detroit to Grand Rapids? And they're like, yeah, that's not too different. Yeah. And then how about a little further up northern Michigan? Well, we don't have trucks that go up there, but if you can guarantee us some business, we'll get some.
That's absolutely right. And I'll take it a step farther. What we're starting to see is for brokerages that have a solid handle on their network and where they have capacity, they can even go seek freight where they know, like if you've got a solid carrier and they know they've got the West Coast covered, right? They just run that left and right. They can go seek freight that's on the West Coast, right? And they know they've got a reliable partner that's going to run it for them. So that's where those relationships really come into handy. It's not just cover the load, but it's how can we build a network that allows the brokerage to grow and find more freight all across the country in ways that they're positioned to actually succeed on running it.
Right. And I think that gives you a lot more confidence when you are bidding on something.
You're not asking a random carrier, hey, can you run this, for the RFP? Like you've had those conversations and they're going to be there. They're very reliable in that case. So that's where we see just the power of this type of relationship building with carriers that we've kind of lost. We've kind of fallen away from in so many ways over the last couple of years for a variety of reasons, right? And that's why NextBoard exists.
Well, we've always wanted to do more with the same carriers. But it was always difficult to do it manually. And then it was when we added automation, it seemed like it took us away from that a little bit. And, if a broker says we're looking at what our cost is per load, we're trying to automate more things, want to grow without adding any headcount. Those are all good things to do. I just think what we have to do is somehow free ourselves up to build relationships. And, it's interesting, the technologies like LinkedIn or Facebook, so many others, we look and say, oh, those are great to keep track of your friends and your contacts. But we don't necessarily look and go, yeah, I've got 25,000 connections on LinkedIn. Now I can go on there and see how I can connect with each one of them and build a relationship. You're like, we only have relationships with 150 people in our lives. That's about it. Some fade away and come back later, and others come in.
And anytime anyone does brag about how many connections they have on LinkedIn, you need to reevaluate your relationship with them, I think.
Yeah, well, it's a funny thing. I heard a comedian say this not so long ago. He said, the more friends you have on Facebook, the fewer friends you have in real life.
There's certainly some truth to that, right? I mean, there's this notion of breadth and depth, right? So if you're out there saying you've got 50,000 carriers in your network, the chances are you don't run very deep with many of them, right? You're just hitting all of them up all the time. Whereas if you do have a more concentrated group, and again, let's speak realistically, right? Like this is freight, and there will be times when you have to go, run with another carrier. Like there's sometimes you do just have to cover the damn load. But when you have those deeper relationships, you're setting yourself up for more success. And then that kind of managed by exception comes into play with those new carriers, right? Okay, we've got to move this. This is a customer we've got to take care of. So let's get hit the load boards and get that taken care of.
Brent, this is like many other proactive things in our lives. We can say, oh, I'd be better off if I could get to the gym and get that walk in and do all the things to build my relationships with my loved ones. And somehow, some way, those things become the second and third and maybe no priority to them. So we know it's the right thing, but we don't necessarily do it. And I think that these relationships with carriers is the same thing. And again, I can tell you this, my own experience, trying to build a relationship with a carrier who doesn't see you as as a useful broker. Not easy. There has to be they're not going to build relationships and they go, Joe, we don't run freight in your area very much. Oh, okay. Well, we're not going to be friends anymore.
You're not going to invite me to the family barbecue? No, and you bring up an interesting point there, because again, I've never met a broker who says like, we don't want relationships or we don't care about relationships. But figuring out how to actually do it is the tricky part. Like, how do you actually go about, because reps will get on the phone and say, hey, what do you like to run? But if they're not putting that information in a central place that can be accessed by the entire team, if that information isn't being applied, fairly in real time to the freight that's coming onto the board, it doesn't really do that much good, right? If it's just going into a spreadsheet that rep has that's got 50 other carriers, like that's not gonna be the most successful relationship. You're not gonna get the most utilization out of that carrier that you possibly can. And that's, again, it's tough. It's a harder habit to break for these guys because this is how they've done it, right? This is how they've wanted to do it. And it does take some organizational rigor to say, we're going to start to collect this information. Like, we're going to do that. And the tricky part there is it's not always an immediate payoff, right? If you tell me your preferences and what you like to run today, I may not have anything for you there right now, right? But I can check back in a week, and if our freight matching gets you a couple of opportunities, then you're going to see that come into play. And if in 2 weeks or a month, you still haven't gotten them any freight, that probably means that's really not the right carrier to develop a relationship with, right? Like, that's not the guy to go with. But you have kind of the history, the receipts, if you will, as the kids like to say this isn't the right guy. We got to go find another carrier that's going to actually help us support the freight that we have.
I love it. So if somebody's listening, they say, yes, Brent, I need this. What does the implementation look like on this?
Yeah. So we're already integrated with a number of TMSs. TMS integration is pretty pivotal for a system like NextBoard. We need to have all of that freight data coming in and over to our system. So we're integrated with a number of them like Turvo and Tai and others. And we always have more coming down the pipeline. So if you're interested, definitely let us know and we'll figure out if your TMS is already integrated. It doesn't take us that long to get integrated with the other TMSs out there. So that's how you go about doing it.
So if let's just say I'm using Turvo and I say, okay, I'm using Turvo or Tai or one of the others that you're already there. How fast is the implementation? And is there training? Is this difficult to use, hard to use?
Yeah, so it takes a week to 2 weeks to get you onboarded. So not very long at all. And we do all the heavy lifting. So really it's just you give us access to a couple of things. Your TMS is largely the key there. And we take care of you and we get your system, your instance of NextBoard up and running, ready to go. We do offer trainings, although I'll say this. One thing that we're very focused on at NextBoard is user workflows. And what we'd say, this is very tech, but like good UX, good user experience. The idea is you shouldn't need a degree to figure out how to use our system. It is designed to be quickly adopted. In fact, we've had reps that have started at a brokerage and they've been covering freight within a week of using NextBoard. Reps that have never covered freight in their history and their careers ever before. So that's how we design it.
Yeah, it's consumer grade technology. And so none of us would use Lyft or Uber or Amazon if they said, yeah, it's easy. You just go online, you take the 2-hour training and you'll be able to buy something on Amazon. Be like, no, I don't want it then.
It's not worth it. Right. And we've seen that. Like, I think there's a very healthy amount of skepticism in the freight community, the brokerage community now around technology, and it needs to be that easy to adopt, right? You can't expect folks to invest days and days and days of training only to sort of have it figured out at the end of it, right? It's got to be pretty off the shelf, ready to go.
Yeah. So I know you have strong feelings about this, so I'm going to ask, what about phone apps on this?
Yeah, so we do have strong feelings. We also know the industry, carriers specifically, have a great amount of fatigue at this point and being
app fatigue.
App fatigue. It is real. I mean, I think all of us feel it in every industry because we've all been asked to download an app and we all roll our eyes and figure out if there's another way to go about doing it. So NextBoard is entirely web-based. On the carrier side, as of right now, there's very little friction whatsoever anytime they're interacting with a broker via NextBoard. So it's very easy to use, and we keep that in mind because we know that those guys have been asked dozens and dozens of times to go download an app, to go set up credentials, to go do something, and then also check back on a daily basis on that app, all that kind of stuff. So we're mindful of that. We want to make sure we're not doing that.
And I think one of the challenges of all that, and I don't think anybody creates an app or any other tech with the idea that it's not going to work. When we first started doing freight matching, might have a ton of business on the East Coast and say, I need trucks. Well, we got over 18,000 loads available. And then you go, oh, all my carriers are on the West Coast. And they're getting all these, hey, can you move New York to Philly? And you're like, I'm in Vegas. What are you talking about?
Even to that extent, right? Like we put in a fair amount of controls in place to make sure that carriers aren't just getting random ass offers, right? That they're like, because we also know that turns them off really quickly to wanting to use a platform. So we use this information that we have on them that's proprietary to the broker at the end of the day to cater the offers and experiences that they're getting so that they're actually relevant for them.
Right. That relevance really matters. And you and I, before we hit the record button, we're talking about apps. You go to a movie, you see a movie, and then the next day, hey, would you review that movie? And then the day after, you want to see a movie? And then you're like, how do I delete this? And we get it with hotels. We get it with the airlines.
What is it? Rate that movie. Write a review for the movie, book your next movie, like all this stuff. And you're like, man, leave me alone. Right.
I love, every once in a while. So I bought some shoes. They're Hokas. So I love them. I bought them and they said something about if you buy them with your text, if you use their text system, you get free shipping. Well, now I get random text messages saying, hey, would you like to buy some Hokas? I was like, yes, I will. When the two pair that I have wear out, I was going to buy them anyway, but getting a random text message at 9:00 at night isn't making me want to buy them.
I love picking up these days Gen Z lingo, which it just shows my age at this point. But I think they would say like, let them cook at this point. Like let the ones that you have go for a little bit before you ask us to buy more. That's
yeah. Yes. All right, Brent, I'm going to do the best I can to summarize, and I'm going to get your final thoughts on the topic. So I'm talking to my friend Brent Evans, and he spells it like it's Evans. But and the name of the podcast is Carrier Sales Teams Are Being Run the Wrong Way. And your point to that is perhaps we're measuring them wrong. We're kind of measuring with these lagging indicators of loads covered and gross margin and maybe utilization. Rather than kind of getting them being more proactive about building these relationships. The post and pray, we didn't talk a lot about it, but we talked about load boards. Not all of them. Again, load boards, we have a need for them, but sometimes it can cause some of the freight fraud that we've seen. It can get us into risky relationships. There's a lack of account familiarity. There's a clunky procurement process in some cases because you're bringing on new carriers all the time. There's that one and done that is risky to quality. It's risky to our safety, our security with freight fraud and cargo theft. And you talked about kind of switching to being more intentional about who we're working with and not building relationships with everybody, but building relationships with the guys who it makes sense, not a spray and pray, not a post and pray. You're going to start being focused on working with the same companies and getting to that point where you say, I know exactly what the utilization rate is, and we're getting good measurements, good indicators of what to do. And we talked about kind of cleaning up that clunky procurement process. And again, I think everybody wants to use automation. Automation isn't the problem. I think the problem is, well, it is the solution. Let's face it. Automation is a solution, but it can pull us away from relationships unless we have something like NextBoard that gives us sort of a dashboard for here's where the relationship should be. Here's the phone calls you should be making. Enough of my blather. Put a big old bow on this one, Brent Evans.
Yeah, you summed that up really nicely, to be honest. Look, we've talked with a lot of brokerages over the last year plus at this point. And we're seeing this trend. There is a realization that freight brokerages have moved away from carrier relationships. Some of them certainly still have them, but there's been this general trend to move towards this more transactional model, right? To cover, as we say, just cover the damn load. And I think there's been a realization by the industry as a whole that comes with unforeseen costs up front, right? Whether that be operational sluggishness with more fall-offs or performance issues with carriers with not delivering on time or having higher claims percentages, all that kind of stuff. At worst, right, we've seen fraud, right? Like fraud is continuing to grow across the country. And so the best way you can improve all of those things is really to lean into relationships and carriers that you've worked with in the past and understand how they work and they understand how you work. And that's just not the easiest thing to do in the world. We've seen it. It's not easy to centralize all that carrier data. It's not easy to apply it methodically to the freight that's coming onto your board, right? And we've seen that realization from brokers, and NextBoard is here to help them get to that next level, to start building those relationships, to start improving that operational efficiency, and procure the right carrier in the right way seamlessly, right? And so we're happy to do that. And hopefully folks will hear this and want to reach out and talk more.
Yes, I think they will. So I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile, a link to your website, and any other links you give me if you've been on other podcasts or videos, whatever you have, please give me those and I'll put those in the show notes. And what conferences will we see you and the fine folks from NextBoard at?
Yeah, so I know you mentioned Manifest earlier. I was actually there. I wish we would have met in person there.
Oh, I swear Manifest is awesome, but if you don't plan ahead, it's hard to see anyone. Even the guys I planned to see, I was like, you like high five, talk to them for 5 minutes.
I was going to say, I was just like, one conversation after another there. I definitely had major FOMO. I wasn't at TIA. Next year, I will definitely be there because I saw everything on LinkedIn and I was missing that. I will be at Broker Carrier Summit in Indy in 2 weeks.
Oh, I'm going to be there too. I'll see you in person. Awesome.
Excellent. Well, if anyone who listens catches that, feel free to come up and chat with me. Would love to learn more, but I'll be there.
The Broker Carrier Summit is April 28th through May 2nd. You don't have to be there for the whole thing. So I know there's a lot of drivers who come. And I think they encourage you, if you can make it there for one day or half a day, please make it. And I've heard nothing but great things about it. I've never been to Broker Carrier Summit. I've talked to Dan Lindsay multiple times on the podcast, and I love what he's doing. And I told him last time I talked to him, it's an event that people seem to take ownership for. Everybody who's involved in it kind of feels strongly about this is what we're doing.
It's very grassroots, right?
Yes, it is. And I told him, I said, I hope you can scale this without losing that, because that is it's a superpower.
I agree. It'll be my first, so I'm excited. Really looking forward to it. And I've never been to Indianapolis either, so that'll be my first time there.
It is. I've been there a little bit, but it's one of the things people always kind of they think of Indianapolis as like it's like a farm town. It's more of a tech town than There's a lot of technology there, and a lot of logistics there.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, Brent, thank you so much for taking the time. I really love what you guys are doing.
Joe, thank you for having me. Looking forward to being on again in the future sometime.
Yes, and I'll see you at the Broker Carrier Summit.
All right. See ya. Have a good one.
And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.